Math 7, Mr. Uy here. Obviously, I'm not there today. Got the crazy hair going on here. This presentation is all about making sure that you know exactly what you need to do for today, setting you up for the agenda, and giving you a little bit of notes to take. So realize that you should have gotten the notes page from the sub by now. So if you're watching this video, definitely make sure that you've got those note pages in front of you. Because we're going to go over a few problems here for your Math 8 Jumpstart, and just remember that this is just to set you up for success. So let's take a look at what you have in store for today and make sure that you're staying on point. All right, in order, this is exactly what you need to do. So step 1, you are watching the video. Good job. Step 2, as you're watching this video, make sure you take some notes, especially on the solving portion of it, because these are the skills that you need to make sure that are in the front of your mind for next year in Math 8. Step 2, there's some practice on the back of your worksheet, only 8 problems. Please make sure that you work your way through them as slowly as possible, show your work, and turn it in before the end of class to make sure you get full credit for today's in-class assignment. Now, if you have time, after you do all of these things, there's a graphing game that I posted on Desmos that you can have some fun with and have a happy Friday with. So these are the things that you need to make sure that you're doing. Now, let's take some notes. Day 2 of solving equations for our jumpstart here deals primarily with one thing and one thing only, distribution. Now, if you do not remember what distribution is, it is definitely our first step in solving equations. So if you remember, DC-MAM stands for the order in which we solve equations. C stands for combine like terms, then moving the variable, adding or subtracting, and multiplying or dividing. So we're going to focus on one skill set here. We're going to definitely make sure that we know how to add or subtract when we're solving equations, as well as multiplying or dividing. But today we are focusing on distribution. So we got to make sure that you understand how to solve when there's distribution in the equations. All right, so here is example number 1. A dead giveaway that this is going to be a distribution problem is these parentheses. So whenever you see the parentheses in a problem, you know that first off, you got to make sure that you distribute and get rid of those parentheses. So if you forgot about distribution, all you need to remember is that it's nothing more, nothing less than taking this front number, 2, drawing 2 lines to everything that's inside the parentheses and multiplying those terms together. So 2 times 3x, that first line that I drew, gives me 6x. Boom, there's my first distribution step done. Second step is taking that second line, that 2 times 1 gives me a positive 2. Now that I've done my distribution, I have no need for the parentheses anymore. So the whole purpose of distributing in this process is making sure that you've got yourself a brand new expression. Now I bring down the equal sign and the negative 10 because I've done nothing to those two things. Now what you should see is this is exactly like the two-step equations that we covered last time we did our jump start. So now it's nothing more, nothing less than following the steps that we covered before. So my first step here is subtracting 2 from both sides. The 2's cancel. I bring down my 6x, the equal sign. Negative 10 minus 2, and again, be careful here. If you need to use a calculator, definitely do so, but negative 10 minus 2 gives me negative 12. Dividing both sides by 6, I get my final answer here, which is negative 2. And bada bing, bada boom, I've done my first distribution problem. So let's take a look at some more examples to make sure that you have this skill on lock. All right, next example, nearly identical here, except all I did was change the numbers. Again, we should be able to identify the fact that we've got some parentheses to deal with here. So that means distribution needs to occur before we start solving. So once we do a little bit of distribution, so I take that 2, draw 2 lines, boom, boom. Remember those lines that are connecting the front number to the numbers inside the parentheses represents multiplying. So 2 times 4 gives me 8x. 2 times 6 gives me a positive 12. Bring down the equal sign, bring down the negative 12. Again, we've got ourselves our two-step equation. And now we know the process that should occur after this. So subtracting 12 from both sides, bada bing, bada boom. 12's cancel, the 8x comes down, the equal sign comes down, negative 12 minus 12, please be careful here, that is not 0. Again, please use a calculator if you need it. So this gives me negative 24. And then my last step, divide both sides by 8. 8's cancel. I'm left with my final answer, which is x is equal to negative 24 divided by 8 gives me negative 3. So bada bing, bada boom, second problem down. All right, so last problem in this problem set here, I'm throwing at you just because I want to make sure you don't get confused by the change in the way a problem looks. One of the biggest things for me is that you just understand the process so that no matter how the problem looks, you understand the steps in order to solve. So even though this one looks a little bit different from the other ones we just solved, realize that one thing that is the same is the fact that I see those parentheses. So again, whenever you see those parentheses in a problem in which you have to solve, please remember to distribute. So once I see those parentheses, dead giveaway here is to make sure I take that front number 5 and I distribute it to everything inside those parentheses. Again, drawing those lines is an important place marker for me to make sure I remember to do that. So 5 times 3 in the front gives me 15. 5 times a negative 2m gives me a negative 10m. Bring down the equal sign and bring down the negative 25. Now this is a two-step equation. Even though it looks super weird, just remember that all I have to tackle when I solve these types of problems is the regular number first. So the regular number that I need to tackle first is this 15. So how do I get that 15 over to the other side? Inverse operations tells me I got to subtract 15 from both sides. So do not touch that negative 10m in the middle, because guess what? That is the last step in my process. So 15's cancel, so positive 15 and that subtraction from 15 cancel. Bring down the negative 10m because I didn't do anything with it yet. Bring down the equal sign. Negative 25 minus 15. So again, if you need a calculator here, make sure you're using a calculator. Negative 25 minus 15 gives me a negative 40. And my last step here is to divide both sides by negative 10. Bada bing, bada boom. Negative 10's cancel on the left-hand side. I'm left with my final answer, which is m is equal to negative 40 divided by negative 10 gives me a positive 4. And ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. Okay, so for this last two problems, all you need to make sure that you do is write down these notes. So special note here, think of an opposite, aka subtraction sign, as a coefficient of negative 1. And here's what I mean by that. If you encounter a problem that looks like the following, boom. Don't be scared about how this problem looks. Again, just like before, please make sure that you rely on your steps here. So what you should be able to identify again is these parentheses. Whenever you see the parentheses, remember you need to distribute. Now here is why this is a special case. If you notice in the front, there's no regular number out there, but there is a negative sign. Now in front of that is invisible number, and I always want you to write this invisible number down. That invisible number is 1. So yes, even though there's just a negative out there, it's the same thing as distributing a negative 1 to everything inside of the parentheses. So once I do this, I get a negative 1x. Negative 1 times a positive 5 gives me a negative 5. Bring down the equal sign and bring down the 12. Now just like before, after we do our distribution step, we now have our two-step equation that we can solve. So I add 5 to both sides to get rid of that regular number first. 5's cancel, bring down that negative 1x, the equal sign, and 17. And my last step here is to divide both sides by that negative 1. Negative 1's cancel, and I'm left with my final answer, which is x is equal to, so 17 divided by a negative 1, just remember that rule, positive divided by a negative gives me a negative here, gives me a negative 17. And bada bing, bada boom, you have done the second to last example. Let's take a look at our final. All right, so give this one a shot. Write it down and make sure that you know how to get through this one. So pause the video here, see if you can get this one done. Did you pause it? Pause it, you cheater. Pause it. Okay, cool. So please make sure you remember, again, this right here is a dead giveaway of distribution. In this case, we see those parentheses. That negative out front shouldn't scare us because we remember that it's nothing more, nothing less than just a -1. Once I've identified that -1 out front, all I need to do now is carry out the distribution step. So -1 times x gives me a -1x. -1 times a -3 gives me a +3. Bring down that equal sign and bring down that -8. Again, remember that negative times a negative gives you a positive. Now we've got ourselves our two-step equation. Subtract 3 from both sides, bada bing, bada boom. 3's cancel. Bring down the -1x because I haven't done anything to it. Bring down the equal sign. -8 minus 3 on the right gives me a -11. And my last step here is dividing both sides by this -1. Bada bing, bada boom. -1's cancel. I'm left with x is equal to -11 divided by a -1 gives me a +11. So negative divided by a negative gives me a positive. And boom, I am done with distribution day 2. Cool. So going back to the things you have to do in order here, we've done the notes. If you made it this far, hopefully you took all those notes. Make sure they're as neat and concise as possible. Now what you should move on to is the practice on the back. So there's 8 questions on the back that deal with exactly what we've done during this entire slideshow presentation here. So finish those 8 problems, make sure you show your work obviously, and turn those into the sub before you leave. Once you finish that, if you've got some time, there's a graphing game on Desmos that I've provided you. Pretty interesting stuff, definitely stuff for critical thinking, cool. My expectations for today are pretty straightforward, so please make sure that you understand that one big thing is you gotta finish this work in class today. So after you watch this video, work diligently to make sure you finish those 8 questions. Afterwards, either work on stuff for another class or continue on with that Desmos activity. Be productive, obviously, be respectful to the sub, and handle your business. So if you need earphones or anything, please make sure that you remember to return them to the place that you found them. But other than that, I will see you guys on Monday. Thank you guys so much for your hard work. We're almost done with the school year. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So please, please, please make sure that you hold it down in my absence. Be great, be good, and I will see you later. Peace.